The galaxy had many legends, but none were as terrifying and respected as the Deathworlders. These beings came from planets that were known for their deadly and unforgiving environments. Their worlds were not places of beauty or peace. Instead, they were harsh, with toxic atmospheres, constant storms, and creatures that would tear you apart if you weren't quick enough. Life on these planets was a constant battle for survival. The Deathworlders were not like the gentle species of the galaxy. They didn't rely on technology alone or hide behind walls. They fought for every breath, every step, and every bit of food. And that made them the most dangerous creatures in the universe. There was nothing they feared. The oceans were filled with giant, bloodthirsty predators. The skies were ruled by creatures that could tear apart ships with a single swipe. And the ground, it was a battlefield where every step could lead to a trap. But the Deathworlders, born in these harsh conditions, had adapted. They were strong, they were ruthless, and they were unrelenting. Other species across the galaxy had learned to avoid the Deathworlders. They'd heard the stories of their warriors, who could survive where others would perish. They'd heard of their great battles, where enemies would tremble at the sight of a Deathworlder charging into the fray. But there was one thing that the Deathworlders did not expect, something that even their vast experience could not prepare them for. It all started with a message. The Deathworlders had never been ones to send help. They weren't merciful creatures. They believed in the law of survival of the fittest, and they were the fittest. If a species was weak enough to be wiped out, then they were unworthy of saving. That was the way of the galaxy. And yet, one day, a message appeared on their communication channels, an urgent call for help. At first, the Deathworlders thought it was just another species begging for mercy. Weak, helpless, and doomed to be wiped out by a more powerful enemy. It wasn't something they usually bothered with. However, this was different. The message was different. The voice that spoke to them was filled with desperation. But it wasn't pleading. There was a strange strength behind it, something that caught the Deathworlders' attention. "Help us," the message pleaded. "We are being attacked. We are on the brink of extinction, but we have one chance to survive. Come and face our enemies with us. We need your strength." The voice spoke in a language the Deathworlders didn't recognize, but their technology translated it easily. It was clear. It was simple. It was a cry for help, but it didn't sound like the usual cry. This wasn't about begging. This wasn't about fear. This was different. The Deathworlders' leader, known for his unmatched skills in battle and his fearlessness, listened carefully to the message. Something in it intrigued him. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, a curiosity, a challenge. He turned to his council, the fiercest warriors from the Deathworlder race. "Who would dare challenge us for help?" he asked, his voice cold but filled with interest. The other Deathworlders were silent for a moment. They exchanged glances, their eyes narrowing. No one had ever dared challenge them. The galaxy feared them, respected them, and they had never needed to answer to anyone. But this was different. This wasn't a challenge in the form of a battle. It was a call for action, a call to something they weren't used to. They had never been a race that helped others, especially not weak, fragile species, but something in the message had struck a chord with them. They didn't know what it was yet, but they were going to find out. "Prepare the fleet," the leader ordered, his tone firm. "We are going to answer this call. But we will not go in blind. We will observe. We will learn. And if this species is truly worthy, we will offer our aid. If not, we will leave them to their fate." And so the Deathworlders began their journey to the planet of the mysterious species that had dared to contact them. As they traveled through the vast reaches of space, they couldn't shake the feeling that this would be no ordinary mission. The Deathworlders had seen everything there was to see in the galaxy. They had fought in countless wars, faced enemies of unimaginable power, and survived the most brutal environments. Yet, here they were, heading to an unknown world to meet an unknown species who had the audacity to ask for their help. As they approached the planet, the leader stood before his warriors, his eyes burning with anticipation. "Prepare yourselves," he said. "We will face something we have never faced before. And when we arrive, we will see if this species is truly worthy of standing alongside the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known." The fleet descended toward the planet's surface, and the Deathworlders could feel the tension in the air. This was a new kind of battle, not one of strength or fear, but of something much deeper. And as they prepared to land, one question echoed in the minds of every Deathworlder. Who were these beings that had dared to summon them? What could they possibly offer that would make the mighty Deathworlders pause in their tracks? Little did they know, they were about to face an encounter that would shake them to their very core. The Deathworlder fleet descended through the atmosphere, their ships cutting through the clouds with ease. The planet below was a stark contrast to the war-torn zones the Deathworlders had left behind. The world appeared peaceful from the sky, lush forests sprawling in every direction, with winding rivers and towering mountains rising majestically. Yet something felt off. An unnatural stillness hung in the air, an underlying tension that even the Deathworlders couldn't ignore. As the ships touched down on the planet's surface, the Deathworlders stepped out. Their massive armored frames contrasted sharply with the delicate trees and vibrant flowers surrounding them. Their eyes, trained to see danger where others saw nothing, scanned every inch of the environment. The air smelled different, clean, yet with a metallic edge that made them uneasy. The ground beneath their boots felt soft, almost too soft, like the soil had been untouched by any real conflict. But the most unusual part, the lack of defense. On every world they'd been to, there was always some form of security. Detection systems, fortified outposts, weapon systems in place. But here, on this alien world, there was nothing. No signs of life, no security measures, just an eerie calm. "This is strange," the leader muttered, his sharp eyes darting around. "Where are they? Where are the ones who call us here?" His voice was low, but the other warriors felt the same sense of unease. They had never encountered anything like this before. Even in the most peaceful of worlds, there were always precautions. But this felt like a trap. They moved cautiously toward the designated coordinates, where they were supposed to meet the alien species. The jungle around them was quiet, too quiet. The Deathworlders' boots crunched softly against the underbrush as they made their way deeper into the woods. The sounds of birds and insects were absent, leaving behind only the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The leader signaled for the group to stop. "Hold," he ordered. His eyes scanned the surroundings with practiced vigilance. "We need to be careful. Something doesn't feel right." Just as they were about to move forward again, a rustling sound came from the trees ahead. A low, eerie growl echoed through the still air, making every Deathworlder's body tense. They immediately raised their weapons, ready for anything. But nothing appeared. The noise faded away, swallowed by the dense forest. What was that? One of the warriors whispered, gripping his weapon tighter. The leader motioned for them to remain silent. "Stay alert." They continued walking, their senses heightened. Every movement, every sound, every rustle of the leaves made them wary. They were used to the threat of enemies lurking in the shadows. But this felt different. This was not the normal chaos of battle or the adrenaline of an ambush. This was something strange, something that didn't belong in the known universe. The Deathworlders couldn't explain it, but they could feel the weight of it pressing on them. As they neared the clearing, a figure emerged from the shadows. The Deathworlders tensed, their weapons aimed, but the figure didn't move toward them. It stood perfectly still, watching them. It was an alien unlike any they had encountered before. The creature stood on two legs, like a humanoid, but its form was wiry and thin, its features angular and sharp. Its skin had a strange, translucent quality, shimmering in the sunlight as if it were something otherworldly. The alien's eyes were large and black, reflecting the intensity of the Deathworlders' movements. The leader of the Deathworlders narrowed his eyes. "This is the one who called us," he said, his voice cold. "What is this creature?" The alien stepped forward slowly, its movements deliberate and cautious. It was clear that it didn't want to provoke the Deathworlders, but there was something in the way it moved that hinted at desperation. I am the one who called you," the alien said, its voice strangely melodic, though laced with an unfamiliar tension. Its tone was not one of fear, but of exhaustion. I need your help. My people, we are not what we seem." The Deathworlders stood in silence, unsure of how to respond. The idea of someone asking them for help was almost unfathomable, especially from a species they had never encountered before. But there was something in the alien's voice, something in the way it looked at them, that made the leader hesitate. "We came because you asked for our strength," the leader said, his voice steady. "What is it that you want from us?" The alien took a deep breath, looking up at the towering Deathworlders with a mixture of awe and fear. "You think I called you here for simple help, but there is much more at stake. My people, we are not the only ones. You were right to question the peace you see here. There are dangers lurking, greater than anything you have faced, and we need your strength to survive." The Deathworlders exchanged glances, their wariness deepening. This was no ordinary request. This was something far more dangerous than they had imagined. "What kind of danger?" one of the warriors asked, his voice low and skeptical. The alien swallowed hard, as if the words were difficult to speak. "Something ancient," it said, "something powerful. And if we cannot stop it, we will all perish." The air grew still again. The words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time since landing, the Deathworlders felt a sense of uncertainty. They had faced countless enemies, fought in wars that would have shattered lesser races, but this was something different, something they could not predict. They had come to help, but now they wondered if they had made a mistake. Could the great Deathworlders truly be the answer to the chaos that was coming? Or would they be forced to confront a darkness greater than any they had ever known? The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of the alien's words. "The enemy is already here." The Deathworlders stood in tense silence, their weapons still raised, eyes scanning their surroundings. They could feel the weight of the alien's words pressing down on them like a storm. The air around them seemed to grow thicker, more suffocating, as if the very atmosphere itself was aware of the looming danger. "The enemy is already here," the alien repeated, its voice trembling now, not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of its statement. "And they are far worse than anything you faced before." The leader of the Deathworlders narrowed his eyes, stepping forward. "What do you mean? Who are they?" His voice was low but firm, the question ringing with authority. The rest of the crew tensed, waiting for an answer. The alien seemed to hesitate, as if gathering the courage to speak. It finally spoke in a softer tone. "We call them the Nihil. They are an ancient race, older than our civilization, older than your own. They have lived in the shadows, watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike." The Deathworlders exchanged uncertain glances. They had never heard of this race, the Nihil, but that didn't mean much. There were countless species out there, some known and others forgotten. However, the way the alien spoke, the fear in its eyes, it was clear that this was no ordinary threat. "What do you mean by strike?" asked the second in command, his voice tinged with skepticism, but also a hint of concern. "What do they want?" The alien's eyes flickered with an emotion the Deathworlders couldn't place. Fear, regret, perhaps even sorrow. The Nihil aren't interested in conquest or power. They seek only destruction. Their entire existence is centered around erasing everything they encounter. They believe the universe is better off without life. They have wiped out entire star systems, entire civilizations, just to feed their hunger for nothingness. The leader of the Deathworlders clenched his fists, the metal of his gauntlets making a faint grinding sound as his muscles tensed. He could feel the blood of countless battles coursing through him, his instincts screaming at him that this was no ordinary enemy. This wasn't a simple invasion. This was something far more terrifying. Then why have they waited so long? The leader asked, his voice heavy with suspicion. Why have they waited until now? The alien seemed to shrink back at the question, its body language speaking volumes of the deep pain it was trying to hide. Because we didn't know they were out there. We were too focused on our petty conflicts, our wars and alliances. But the Nihil have been watching, waiting for the right time to strike. And now they have found us. Found me. The leader's gaze hardened as he looked the alien over. It was clear now. This wasn't just a simple rescue mission. The Deathworlders had stepped into something much darker, something they hadn't prepared for. The alien had called them here, but it was clear that their arrival might have been the very catalyst for the Nihil to take action. So you're saying we're too late? The second in command asked, his voice filled with doubt. The alien shook its head quickly. No, you're not too late. But the danger is already here. We've been preparing for their arrival, but there's only so much we can do. We need your help to stop them, to fight back. If we don't, the Nihil will erase everything. Everything we've worked for, everything you fought for. All of it will be gone. The Deathworlders stood still, the weight of the alien's words sinking in. The peaceful world they had landed on, the strange and unshakable calm. They had been fooled. This wasn't a place for rest or respite. It was a battlefield. And the enemy, the Nihil, was far beyond anything they had encountered before. The leader stepped forward once more, his armor creaking as his massive form moved. You've brought us here for a reason, he said, his voice low and powerful. Tell us what you need. We will not fail you. We never have. The alien looked up at him, its dark eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. You're the last hope. We are too weak to fight them alone. But you are Deathworlders. You understand destruction. You understand war. With your strength, we have a chance. The leader nodded. We'll fight, but we need more than just information. We need to know everything. The Nihil, their weaknesses, their plans. The alien's eyes darkened again, a shadow crossing its face. They have no weaknesses. The Nihil are beyond weaknesses, beyond fear. But they do have one thing we can use. They are bound to an ancient power, a force that keeps them alive, keeps them unstoppable. The Deathworlders tensed again. A power, an ancient force. It sounded like something out of legend, something that didn't belong in the real world. The alien continued. But that power has a cost. It is tied to the very fabric of this universe. And if we can destroy it, we can destroy the Nihil. The leader clenched his fists again, the weight of the task ahead of him settling heavily on his shoulders. Destroy the Nihil, and they would save this world. But the cost, what would that cost be? Was it worth risking everything they had, everything they were? We'll find it, the leader said, his voice unwavering. We'll destroy them. But deep in his heart, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cost of victory would be greater than they could ever imagine. As they began to prepare for the battle ahead, the skies above them darkened. A sense of foreboding gripped their hearts, and the Deathworlders knew this would be a war like no other. One way or another, the battle for this world, no, for the galaxy itself, was about to begin. And there would be no turning back. The Deathworlders stood in the war room of their makeshift base, their faces grim as they absorbed the alien's revelation. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their mission pressing down on them like a physical force. Their leader stood at the front of the room, his broad form towering over the gathered crew, a silent pillar of resolve in the midst of the gathering storm. The alien, their reluctant ally, had told them everything it knew about the Nihil, an ancient and terrifying force that lived for one purpose: annihilation. No one knew exactly how the Nihil came to be, but their existence had been a well-kept secret for eons. Now that secret was out, and the galaxy was about to pay the price. "Do we even stand a chance?" one of the Deathworlders asked, breaking the tense silence. His voice was low, but the uncertainty was there. They had faced countless enemies before: alien invaders, hostile planets, uncountable dangers. But none like this. The Nihil weren't just a threat. They were an entire force of nature, seemingly unkillable, unstoppable, and beyond anything the Deathworlders had ever faced. The leader turned toward the voice, his eyes narrowing. "We stand a chance because we have something they don't," he said, his tone sharp, cutting through the tension. "We have strength. We have will. We don't stop until the job is done, no matter how impossible it seems." He walked toward the large map that dominated the room, showing the locations of known Nihil sightings and rumored strongholds. The Nihil thrive on destruction. They'll hit every major system they can, wiping them out with precision. But we can't allow that to happen. We're going to strike first. The second-in-command nodded in agreement, stepping forward. "But how? The Nihil are everywhere, and we don't even know the full extent of their power. What's their weakness? What makes them vulnerable?" The leader paused, his eyes cold and calculating. He had already been thinking about that. "We don't know yet, but we will. We have a way to find out." The alien, still standing off to the side, watched them with a mixture of awe and fear. It had never seen Deathworlders so determined, so willing to face the impossible. The alien had hoped for their help, but now, standing in the room with them, it could see that this was not going to be an easy fight, not by any means. "There's more," the alien said quietly, as if reluctant to speak, but knowing the truth needed to be known. "The Nihil, they don't just destroy worlds. They're after something. An ancient artifact, hidden somewhere in this galaxy. It's a power beyond imagination, and it's what keeps them alive, keeps them strong." The room fell silent once more. An artifact. The Deathworlders had dealt with powerful artifacts before, relics of old civilizations, lost technologies, things that could turn the tide of a war in a heartbeat. But this was something different. The leader's expression remained impassive, but inside, his mind raced. If the Nihil were after an artifact, then it wasn't just their existence that was at risk. It was the very balance of power in the galaxy. He knew they had to find it first. If they didn't, they would be fighting an unstoppable enemy with no chance of victory. "We need to find this artifact," the leader said, his voice cold with determination. "If the Nihil get their hands on it, it's over for everyone. But if we get to it first, maybe, just maybe, we can stop them before they destroy everything." The second-in-command's gaze hardened. "Where do we start?" The alien pointed to a star system on the map, a location far from any major conflict zones. It was a place the Nihil had already attacked, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. But there were rumors. Whispers of an ancient temple, hidden deep in the system's uncharted moons. The artifact, the key to the Nihil's power, was believed to be there. "We start there," the leader said, his voice now full of purpose. "We'll find the artifact before the Nihil do, and we'll use it to turn the tide of this war." The crew stood together, united in their resolve. They were the Deathworlders, the fiercest warriors the galaxy had ever known. They had fought and survived against unimaginable odds, and this would be no different. But as the leader's gaze lingered on the star system, a shiver ran down his spine. Something about this mission didn't sit right with him. The Nihil were unlike anything they had faced. They had no weaknesses, no fear. They were driven by a singular purpose: to destroy. And for the first time, the leader wondered if even the Deathworlders, for all their strength and fury, could really stand a chance against an enemy so relentless. But there was no turning back now. The Deathworlders were already committed, and the battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. The storm was coming. The Deathworlders were ready to fight, but they still didn't know the full extent of what lay ahead. And deep within the darkness, the Nihil were waiting, watching, ready to erase everything, ready to bring the galaxy to its knees. And all the Deathworlders had was their strength, their will, and the hope that they could stop the inevitable. But even they knew that hope might not be enough. The Deathworlders stood aboard their flagship, ready to set course toward the star system where the Nihil were rumored to have been lurking. The crew moved with purpose, their every motion efficient, like the well-oiled machine they had become. They were warriors born from chaos, shaped by the harshest environments, forged by war. But this mission, it felt different. The leader stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the holographic star map. He could feel the weight of his decision, the lives of his crew, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. They were about to make the first move against an enemy, unlike anything they had encountered before. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates." The navigator's voice broke the silence. "We'll be entering the system in 5 minutes." The leader gave a single nod, his jaw clenched. "Prepare for deployment," he ordered. His voice was steady, but his mind was racing. He had never felt this level of uncertainty before. There was no blueprint for this mission, no past experience to guide them. They were entering uncharted territory, but they had no choice. The alien ally they had gathered along the way watched from the corner of the room, its glowing eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. It had never seen the Deathworlders this focused, this determined. The way they carried themselves, the silent confidence in their actions, it was as though they believed victory was inevitable. But the alien wasn't so sure. The Nihil were no ordinary enemy. They were like a plague, unstoppable, relentless, and all-consuming. The Deathworlders may have been tough, but this was a different kind of threat. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The leader turned his gaze toward the alien. "Are you sure this is the right location?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The alien nodded, its eyes narrowing. "This is where they attacked last. There are no signs of life left, just ruins. The Nihil move fast, but they leave nothing behind. We won't find anything alive." A heavy silence filled the room as the words sunk in. The Deathworlders had always prided themselves on their ability to fight and conquer, to turn the tide in even the most desperate situations. But here, in the face of the Nihil, it felt as if they were walking into a trap. "Then we'll make sure they don't leave anything for the Nihil to destroy," the leader declared with steely resolve. "We'll find the artifact, and we'll destroy their hope." "Understood, Captain," the second-in-command responded. All hands ready for the assault. The ship's engines hummed with power as it surged forward into the darkness of the star system. The crew felt the shift in the air, the tension building as they approached the heart of the unknown. They had no way of knowing what awaited them on the other side of the system, but they had no choice. They had to press forward. The moment the ship entered the system, the enemy's presence became undeniable. The Nihil were already here. The void seemed to shimmer with their malevolent energy. Strange, eerie waves of radiation pulsed from the center of the system, disrupting their instruments and communication systems. "Something's wrong," the navigator muttered, hands flying over the controls as the ship began to shake. "We're being pulled toward the anomaly." Before anyone could respond, the lights in the war room flickered and went out, leaving the crew in darkness. The hum of the ship's engines faltered, and the screens went black. It felt as though time itself had stopped, as if the universe had gone silent in the presence of something far more powerful than they had ever imagined. Then, a distant rumble echoed through the ship, a deep, resonating sound that felt like it came from the very heart of the galaxy. The Nihil had made their move. "They're here," the leader said, his voice cold. "Prepare for immediate action. Weapons at full power. We hit them first." The crew scrambled, readying themselves for the coming fight. The ship shuddered as the first shots from the Nihil rang out, tearing into the ship's hull with terrifying precision. The Deathworlders weren't unprepared, though. The ship's massive shields flared to life, absorbing the blows, but it was clear that the Nihil's firepower was unlike anything they had faced before. The leader's mind raced. The Nihil weren't just attacking. They were trying to break them before they could even reach the artifact. The stakes had escalated, and it was no longer just about survival. It was about preventing the galaxy's destruction. Brace for impact. The second-in-command shouted, as the ship rocked with another explosion. Hold them off. We need to reach the artifact. The leader commanded, his voice steady, even as the chaos of battle raged around him. With every passing moment, the situation grew more dire. The Deathworlders fought back with every weapon at their disposal, using everything from high-powered plasma cannons to advanced combat tactics. But the Nihil had already established a foothold. Their numbers seemed endless, their technology far superior. The Deathworlders knew they had to act fast. The artifact was out there, and with it, the key to turning the tide. But the Nihil weren't going to give them the luxury of time. Every second spent battling their relentless assault was another second closer to the galaxy's doom. The ship's shields were failing, the hull was weakening, and the crew's resources were running low. But the Deathworlders were nothing if not tenacious. They would fight until the last, until they either claimed victory or were wiped from existence. "Get us closer to the artifact," the leader shouted. "We can't let them win. This ends now." And with that, they made their final push into the heart of the Nihil's territory, with nothing but the grim resolve of warriors who knew that the fate of the galaxy depended on them. But even the Deathworlders knew that they might not survive this battle. Yet it wasn't fear they felt. It was the fire of determination, the will to fight against an enemy that threatened everything they held dear. The battle raged on. The Deathworlder ship rocked violently as it moved deeper into the heart of Nihil space. The stars around them were blotted out by a dense cloud of dark matter, the only light coming from the explosions that shook the very foundations of their vessel. Each impact sent shockwaves through the ship, the walls trembling as if the very ship itself was beginning to crack under the strain. The crew fought with everything they had, but the Nihil were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Their ships were sleek and terrifying, able to phase in and out of sight, striking without warning, only to vanish before retaliation could be mounted. Their technology was far beyond anything the Deathworlders had ever seen, and their tactics were as brutal as they were efficient. "We can't keep this up much longer," the navigator reported, her voice strained. The ship was barely holding together, and their ammunition was running low. The Nihil had forced them into a corner, and every passing second made it feel as though the walls were closing in. "Stay focused," the leader barked, his eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. He could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He had led them this far, but now, with the Nihil bearing down on them from all sides, he knew that the outcome of this battle could very well be the end of everything. "We're almost there. We just need to reach the artifact, and we can turn the tide." But as the Deathworlder ship neared the center of the Nihil's war zone, something strange happened. A sudden burst of energy washed over them, an unnatural pulse that caused their systems to glitch and flicker. The hull groaned in protest as the external shields began to fail. "What was that?" the engineer shouted, her fingers flying over the control panel in a frantic attempt to regain control. But it was no use. The pulse had done more than just disable their systems. It had made them vulnerable. The Nihil, sensing their weakness, launched another barrage of attacks, and the Deathworlder ship shuddered with each direct hit. The crew was scrambling now, trying to maintain control of the ship while fending off the relentless assault. "We've lost engine power," the navigator cried out. "We're dead in the water." "We're not dead yet," the leader roared back, his voice filled with fire. "Hold steady. We've come too far to back down now. Get us to that artifact, no matter the cost." But as the ship continued to drift toward the heart of the Nihil stronghold, the leader realized that the true power of the Nihil wasn't just in their technology or their numbers. It was in their strategy. The Nihil had carefully laid the groundwork for this battle, luring the Deathworlders into a trap they hadn't even seen coming. "We're walking into a nest of vipers," the second-in-command muttered, her eyes wide with fear as the scope of their situation became clear. "Don't let fear take hold now," the leader responded, his voice hard with determination. "Fear is what they want. We fight through it, or we die trying." The ship was rapidly losing altitude, and the Nihil closed in for the kill. In a final desperate attempt to hold the line, the leader called for one last maneuver, a full power surge to the engines. They would make it to the artifact if it was the last thing they did. "Prepare to fire everything we have," the leader shouted as the crew scrambled to initiate the final strike. With a burst of energy, the ship's engines flared back to life, pushing them forward with incredible force. The ship lurched forward, surging through the debris field toward the artifact. It wasn't enough to stop the Nihil from their relentless attacks, but it was enough to give them the speed they needed to reach their goal. "Brace yourselves," the leader shouted as the ship lurched forward, breaking through a barrage of energy blasts. The very air inside the ship seemed to vibrate as the shield struggled to keep up with the onslaught. But they were close now, so close. Ahead of them, barely visible through the thick cloud of cosmic dust and debris, the artifact gleamed like a beacon in the dark. Its energy field pulsed with a strange, otherworldly glow. This was it. This was what they had been fighting for. But just as the ship was about to reach it, the Nihil launched their final assault. A massive concentrated energy blast struck the hull with such force that it sent the entire ship into a tailspin. The Deathworlders scrambled to regain control, but the damage was done. The ship was spiraling out of control, and the Nihil were closing in. The leader gripped the control panel with white-knuckled hands. "Get us back on course," he shouted. "We're not done yet." But the ship was now fully in the grip of the Nihil's power. They had been played, outmaneuvered at every turn. The artifact was within their reach, but the odds of surviving the attack were rapidly dwindling. It was a bitter truth, but one that the Deathworlders had no choice but to face. As the ship careened toward its target, the leader made one final decision. "Activate the emergency release protocol. Drop everything we have at them." With that command, the last of their weapons, a deadly array of heavy artillery and powerful missiles, was launched at the Nihil. For a moment, it seemed as though the very stars themselves had been ignited as the ships erupted into chaos. But amidst the destruction, there was a glimmer of hope. The artifact still pulsed in the distance, and the Deathworlders, though battered and broken, were not finished yet. They had one final chance to make a difference. "Forward," the leader yelled, his voice raw with determination. "We're taking it, one way or another." As the last of the firepower blazed into the Nihil's ranks, the Deathworlders' ship made its final push toward the artifact, knowing that this final act could be their last. But with everything on the line, they refused to back down. The Deathworlders' ship, battered and bruised, surged forward despite its crippling damage. The Nihil were relentless, their ships closing in with every passing moment. The black void of space felt as if it were pressing down on the crew, the crushing weight of their situation threatening to swallow them whole. Their once mighty vessel was barely holding together, every system flickering and failing as they approached their final destination. The artifact, glowing with an eerie otherworldly energy, was within reach. Its pulsing light grew brighter with each second, and the crew could feel its power radiating through the hull of the ship. But they weren't the only ones who had noticed. The Nihil were aware of what they were after, and they had already begun to move in for the kill. "Shields are failing," the engineer called out, her voice tinged with panic. "We can't hold them off much longer." "Focus," the leader barked, gripping the command console with all his strength. His knuckles were white from the effort, but his eyes burned with a fierce resolve. "We have to reach it. It's our only chance to win this." The Nihil ships closed in, their weapons primed and ready to finish what they had started. Their energy beams streaked through the dark void, lighting up the surrounding chaos with deadly precision. The Deathworlders dodged and weaved, pushing the ship to its limits as they fought against the inevitable. But there was no stopping it now. The Nihil had them cornered. "We can't outrun them," the second in command shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "We're outnumbered, outgunned. There's no way out." The leader didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the glowing artifact ahead of them. It was more than just their last hope. It was the key to turning the tide. It could shift the balance of power in the universe, and the Deathworlders knew that they had no choice but to seize it. "Prepare for the final assault," the leader ordered, his voice cold and steady. "We're going to make this count. No matter what happens, we will not give up. We will take this artifact, or we die trying." The crew exchanged tense glances, but they knew that there was no other choice. They had come too far to turn back now. Every second counted, and the clock was running out. With a deep breath, the leader slammed his fist on the console, triggering the final phase of the plan. All power was diverted to the engines, and the ship lurched forward with a force that nearly threw the crew off their feet. They were headed straight for the artifact, and nothing could stop them. "Brace for impact," the navigator shouted, her eyes wide with fear. But it was too late to change course. The ship plunged forward, the Nihil ships firing their final devastating blasts at them. The hull of the Deathworlder ship cracked and groaned, but they pressed on, using their final moments to strike back with everything they had. The ship shuddered violently, and the crew braced themselves for the inevitable. Then, in a flash of light, everything changed. The artifact flared with an intense energy that engulfed the Deathworlder ship, its power surging through the vessel like a tidal wave. The ship's shields flared to life, absorbing the energy and channeling it back into the engines. The Deathworlders had never felt anything like it before, an incredible surge of power coursing through their veins. "Shielding restored," the engineer exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock. We're still alive." The Nihil ships, caught off guard by the sudden surge of energy, faltered. The Deathworlder ship, now empowered by the artifact, surged forward at an unstoppable speed. With newfound strength, they retaliated with a fury unlike anything the Nihil had ever witnessed. "Fire everything," the leader shouted, his voice filled with unrelenting force. The ship's weapons unleashed a devastating barrage, each shot hitting its mark with deadly accuracy. The Nihil fleet, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the back foot. Their ships began to explode in quick succession, the once mighty fleet crumbling under the Deathworlders' onslaught. The crew cheered as their weapons tore through the Nihil ships, but the leader's gaze remained fixed on the artifact. It was their only advantage. Everything hinged on it. "We need to destroy their command ship," the leader said grimly, his tone low. "Take out the head, and the rest will fall." With the artifact's power coursing through their veins, the Deathworlder ship raced toward the Nihil command ship, the final battle unfolding before them. They were no longer the underdogs. They were not the prey. They were the hunters, and they would stop at nothing to ensure victory. The Nihil fleet scattered in disarray, their once proud ships turning tail as the Deathworlder ship closed in on their leader's vessel. It was the moment of truth. "Prepare to board," the leader ordered. "We end this now." The Deathworlder ship crashed into the command vessel, tearing through its outer hull with a violent explosion. The battle was fierce, but the crew fought with a relentless fury, their hearts driven by the knowledge that victory was within their grasp. And then, with one final blow, the Nihil leader was defeated. The Nihil fleet, broken and scattered, had no choice but to retreat. The Deathworlders had won. And as the dust settled and the stars returned to their normal quiet, the Deathworlder leader stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. They had faced the impossible, and now they had proven their strength. In that moment, the universe would know one thing for certain. The Deathworlders were no longer the underdogs. They were the ones who conquered.